Welcome, everyone, to the Over Under Movies podcast, where we take a prominent figure or franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name's Jason Gong, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, DeAngelis. And on today's pod, we're talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Love it.
Me too. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is the story of a 22-year-old Canadian slacker who meets the girl of his dreams, Ramona Flowers. Soon, Ramona's exes start appearing in Scott's life one by one. Chaos ensues. We watched this movie last night. What were your thoughts on it? You've seen this before, but now we're both older than Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, this movie came out, 2010, I think?
That's right.
So it's based on a comic that was, 2006? Is that what you said?
2004.
2004, okay. So it is from a comic that was in the 2000s. Got picked up for a film adaptation pretty soon after that. It's directed by Edgar Wright. I feel like we should just spend this entire podcast maybe talking about Edgar Wright, because this is such an achievement on his part, this film. It is a completely different movie watching this as a 31-year-old versus a 21-year-old. It's weird because, like, on first watch, when you watch this as like a college student, you go, especially like nerds like us, you go, well, these people are like, they're nerdy and they're a little awkward, but like they're cool, like they're in a band and like they like video games and stuff like that. They're just like me. And upon rewatch, I find myself pretty consistently like hating every character in this movie. And I don't know if that's intended or not. So maybe you can clue me in, because you have read the comic. I have not read the comic.
Yeah, I mean, every character in this movie has flaws, which is good for characters to have. But the comic spends a lot more time examining those flaws, kind of going into why these people are the way they are, and also making it clear when people are bad and how they can be better. This movie kind of has to speed run through a lot of that. So, yeah, like you said, I didn't notice kind of how shitty Scott is as a human being until I was older than him and rewatching this movie. So I've seen this movie like intermittently since it came out. This is probably like the fifth time I've seen it. I still love the film. I think it's awesome. It's action-packed. It's funny. And it's just a ton of fun. But it is interesting seeing like, oh yeah, Scott's a bad person and he needs to become better. And I'm not sure if him fighting 7 evil exes is a perfect metaphor for becoming a better human being through dating.
I guess we can go into the plot like pretty briefly here. It's a very simple movie to explain. You got Scott Pilgrim. He's pining after this woman that he sees because she has multicolored hair, and we know that any nerdy guy in his early 20s, when he sees a woman with multicolored hair, it's like peacocking. Is that what it's called? where you see something that's colorful and you want it. But yeah, he sees Ramona Flowers and he's like, oh, I want to get with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then for some reason she has 7 evil exes that he must battle to the death, quite literally. And that's the entire movie. And you're right, it does feel like a speed run. I'm guessing the comics is each issue like a different X that he's fighting? Is that how they break it down?
Something like that. So each volume of the graphic novel series is usually one X, but there's only 6 volumes in that series, I believe, and then there's 7 X's. So I can't remember the breakdown exactly, but I imagine he fights the twin X's within one volume.
Yeah, I mean, it's one sequence in the movie as well. So, so like, how faithful is this as an adaptation? Would you say it's a pretty good adaptation for what the comic is?
Yeah, it's like 80% faithful, I would say. It just has to trim a lot of stuff. So there are entire like characters and subplots that don't make it into this movie. I have it in my show notes here, just some of the biggest differences. One, the fact that it is 6 volumes means that a lot more story can be told. 2, Envy Adams, who is played by Brie Larson, has a much bigger role throughout the story of the graphic novel. So Envy Adams is Scott Pilgrim's ex, and she's sort of his evil ex, and she's a secondary antagonist in this film, but she's she almost becomes like a protagonist within the graphic novel series, and she gets like a reconciliation and redemption arc and all of that stuff.
Yeah, the movie kind of like buries the lead a little bit that Scott used to date this woman who's like some big rock star now. It kind of really like, I guess we can like start with what is this world? It's one of the things that I kind of struggled with on rewatch is that the movie does no establishment of what this universe is like.
Well, it's Canada, so
It is Canada.
Who knows what goes on up there?
Yeah, who knows? We can only speculate. But because Edgar Wright's first two like feature films that people know are Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. He did this after those two. Those two movies are like fairly well grounded, I would say. Even though like Shaun of the Dead's a zombie movie and Hot Fuzz is a movie about a cult in a small town. There's nothing like too like over the top happening. Not a lot of CGI in those movies. This film, it feels like it starts that same way, where it takes place in Toronto, but like it just looks like a bunch of like suburbs that are covered in snow, basically the entire movie. And then, like all of a sudden, like everybody's good at fighting.
Yeah.
and there's like anime overlays going on, and there's rock music. Everybody is good at music, and everybody's good at fighting. And everything is also in arcade, apparently, because when people die, they explode into coins.
That's right. So this movie is heavily influenced by video games and comic books, because that's what the graphic novel is influenced by. So basically, they take the idea of the video game Street Fighter and turn it into a reality for 20-something-year-old suburban Canadian slackers. And I think it makes it an awesome world. It's very like cartoony, it's fun, and you can kind of see that the fighting is just a metaphor for interpersonal conflict you have with people.
Yeah, I mean, as the viewer, are we supposed to interpret this as like things that are actually happening on screen?
Yeah.
Or is this all meant to be like just like over the top just for the sake of like emphasis? Like when he's punching somebody and he explodes into coins, that's actually what is happening.
That's correct. So when he kills people, they die. But
So Scott's murder count is approaching John Wick levels in this movie.
I read the creator of the graphic novel, Brian Lee O'Malley, has said on his official website, which is just a Tumblr page,
Tough luck. Come on, man.
that when Scott kills someone, they just respawn in their home, having learned their lesson.
Amazing.
So no one's actually permanently dying in this movie or in the graphic novel. This is a universe where you do just go fight people to the death on the streets, but the stakes are not quite as high as life and death.
But that like reincarnation canon, that's just for the comic book, right? Because we do see Scott die in this, and he ends up in some like desert area, and then he uses his +1 health to like revive himself.
The respawning is canon for both the graphic novel and the film. You don't see it happen in either. This is only made canon because Brian Lee O'Malley said it on his Tumblr and then in all caps wrote canon.
Amazing. It would have been cool if we saw like kind of like a scene like in Willy Wonka where like you see all the kids like walking out of the chocolate factory, so you just like they're not dead. Like if we just saw like a scene near the end of the movie where like all of the evil exes were like sitting on like a swing set or something like, while they watched like Ramona and Scott walk away.
I think that would have been interesting and kind of fun to see them having changed because they lost the fight. But I guess originally Brian Lee O'Malley and then eventually Edgar Wright kind of wanted that to be ambiguous, whether or not these fights to the death are really to the death.
So what is the purpose of this story? The idea that he has to go through this woman's 7 exes to get to her. On the surface level, like it's kind of dumb. Like you don't need to like get the permission or anything from the exes to date somebody. And I guess like from like at a deeper level, the movie is all it's meant to be about like character development. The movie essentially,
Yes.
Like as you go through your early 20s into your mid to late 20s, you're supposed to. Everybody's a shithead when they're in their early 20s. So the idea is like, oh, you're learning as a person, you're becoming self-aware that you're an asshole, and you're supposed to weed yourself out of that over time. That's kind of the journey Scott's supposed to go on in this movie. What about fighting the 7 evil exes helps like push him on that journey? What's it supposed to show to us?
Well, I think the idea is just that everyone that you like and that you're going to want to date has a past and they have their own baggage. And it's your responsibility, if you love that person, to help them with their baggage, accept everything, and be willing to fight for the person that you care about. So I think that's generally what he has to learn is that, he's going through her personal dating history and learning more about her through each ex, basically. And by defeating them, he is metaphorically helping her overcome her own issues from the past, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can't tell if Ramona is intentionally written as more of an object than a person. Because at the beginning of the movie, yeah, he's just like, oh, she has multicolored hair. She's really hot. Like, I'm going to go hook up with her. Despite the fact that he has a girlfriend at the beginning of this movie, Jason.
Right. We can really go into how
we want to talk about knives. Let's just talk about knives right now.
Yes.
Why is Scott dating a 17-year-old? And why does the movie make it... It's like the first line of the movie where they say, like, this is Scott. He's 22. He's dating a 17-year-old.
It's the first line in the graphic novel as well, except in the graphic novel, it says, this is Scott. He's 23. He's dating a high schooler.
It doesn't make it better.
Makes it worse.
I should also note that, like, her being 17 or 18 is probably, like, equally as problematic.
Right.
Like, once you're out of high school, don't be looking at high schoolers.
Right.
It's a whole different, like, era of human that you're looking down on.
It's a bold choice to start the film off by saying that this 22-year-old is dating a 17-year-old. It's
like, here's your protagonist. He is doing something deeply, deeply troubling that may be prosecuted.
Yeah,
in most first world countries.
All his friends, no one like really calls him out. All his friends make fun of him, but none of them are like,
yeah, nobody goes to the police. This movie could be 5 minutes long if Kieran Culkin just like called 911 or whatever the Canadian version of 911 is.
Right.
It's very weird. So he's dating this Chinese girl. And she's like madly in love with him. She's like obsessed with him. I feel like it's probably a pretty accurate representation of like what a high schooler dating a young adult loser looks like. They see that young adult loser as like the coolest person in the world.
Right.
Despite the fact that he is a loser.
Yeah, so the only thing Scott really has going for him is that he's in a band and the band is okay. So he doesn't have a job. He hasn't been in a relationship in a long time. He lives in, I think, a 2-room apartment. Or maybe it's just 1 room. I think it's like a studio apartment.
With his gay roommate.
And they share a bed.
They share a mattress on the floor.
So Scott, yeah, right. They don't even have a bed. It's just a mattress. So Scott's really struggling. And then he manages to impress a 17-year-old, which is, I guess, one of your only options when you're really struggling. And she falls in love with him. She gets really, really into his band because she's sort of this sheltered Catholic Chinese schoolgirl who hasn't been around like grungy punk band people before. So the first one she finds, she's like, there's a whole other world that I get to be a part of now. And Scott kind of takes advantage of that, yeah.
And then he immediately sees this other girl and just like kicks knives to the curb completely and just like fucking shatters her heart.
Yes, but he doesn't kick her to the curb right away. He cheats on her first,
yeah,
and then breaks up with her, just to kind of drive in the point of how bad a man this is.
It's weird that like it's got to be intentional. The movie wants you to hate Scott like right from the rip, or maybe not. I feel like if I would have watched this like when I was in college, I'd think that like he's cool or something like that.
Yeah, I thought he was like. I mean, it's what you said before. He's a nerdy, awkward guy, so we're meant to identify with him. And I think it's intentional that he's a flawed character, and you're supposed to see his flaws and understand that dating a 17-year-old when you're 22 is wrong, and that cheating on people is wrong. But the idea is that you're supposed to kind of be with Scott throughout the movie. I don't think you're supposed to hate Scott from the jump.
He's a really weird protagonist, especially like given the fact that there's this huge cast of other characters in the movie that are almost more interesting than he is. When you go through like the X's one by one, it's a crazy cast in this movie. I don't think we've talked about that yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Do you have like the list in front of you of all the the people that are pretty big celebrities nowadays that were relatively minor roles in this film?
I do. So first, to get back to Scott, he's played by Michael Cera, and we were talking about why are we meant to like this person even though he's such a shitty person? Well, Edgar Wright intentionally cast Michael Cera because he was like, this is the guy that people will still follow even though he's an asshole. That's almost a direct quote from the director. So Michael Cera was cast after Edgar Wright watched Arrested Development. Yeah. So
Which Michael Cera is literally just playing Michael Cera again in this movie. He's
right.
playing George Michael. He's playing his super bad character. This is what Michael Cera does.
yeah, and I think it works. Like he's sort of more pitiful than hateable. So you just kind of feel bad for him even while he's being a bad person. Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays Ramona Flowers, so she's quite famous as well. She's in 10 Cloverfield Lane. She was in Sky High, great film.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this yesterday. That like her career hasn't like taken off by any means. This is probably the biggest thing she's known for. This movie came out 13 years ago.
Yeah, but she's been consistently working, and she's still like a name.
Yeah, she was just in the Ahsoka series. She was Hera Syndulla, playing one of the Rebels characters. So I mean, she's still working.
The Green Lady?
Yeah,
That's so funny.
yeah, she's replaceable in that show. Like she's not bringing anything crazy to the table, but
Yeah, I mean,
she's in it.
I feel like everyone's replaceable in that show, but we'll save that for another
Yeah,
podcast.
we'll say that for our Ahsoka review coming in
Yeah.
in 4 years.
I'm not watching that. Although I'm sure everyone worked really hard on the show, and props to them. I don't want
Anyone at Disney or Lucasfilm watching this podcast,
people to be mad.
friend of the pod, Kathleen Kennedy.
I don't know why we picked this podcast format. I never like just being mean to people. I'm sure Ahsoka's a great show. Anyway,
Who else is in this movie, Jason?
Kieran Culkin, who just sort of broke out again in the television show Succession.
Yeah, I haven't seen Succession. I know he's really good in it.
Yeah, he's like a dark horse fan favorite character. He's kind of like this character, except straight, maybe. He's like
He's very gay in this movie.
right, but he's very blunt. He's very like monotone, dry, sarcastic, and willing to call Scott out on his shit. But in his own life, he is a messy bitch.
Yeah, he looks a lot like Macaulay Culkin. I know they're obviously siblings, but like,
Right.
it's kind of like I'm watching on screen. I'm like, oh, that's Macaulay Culkin's brother. Okay.
Yeah, one of his earliest film roles was playing Macaulay Culkin's brother in the Home Alone series. So, yes,
Amazing.
They are brothers.
Listen, you gotta get your start somewhere.
We've got Anna Kendrick as Stacy Pilgrim, Scott's sister. We have Brie Larson, again, as Envy Adams. Allison Pill as Kim Pine, who is the drummer for Scott's band. Aubrey Plaza is in this.
playing as herself.
Yeah. And then these guys are a little lesser known, but still big roles. Johnny Simmons as Young Neil, Mark Webber as Stephen Stills, and Ellen Wong as Knives Chow. So those are considered to be the main characters, according to Wikipedia. And I think they were all pretty brilliantly casted. They were all fun to watch on screen. The band members are very believable as a sort of like failing rock band that really desperately just wants to book gigs, and they play their instruments well.
Yeah,
so.
this is like an all-star lineup. I mean, you haven't even gotten into Chris Evans or Brandon Routh, like a bunch of like other people. Like, especially if you're a nerdy person, you watch like superhero movies and shows, you're gonna recognize these actors.
Yep. So the next group of actors is the League of Evil Exes. So Wikipedia lists them in order of what I assume is their pay grade and not in the order of their appearance in the film. But I will do my best to go 1 through 7. So Matthew Patel is Ramona's first evil ex. He is played by Satya Bhabha. I'm not familiar with most of his other work, but I do know that he is the only British actor that was cast in this film. Edgar Wright intentionally said, I'm not working with any British people for this movie. And then this guy came in and auditioned, but he put on his fake American accent, and he tricked Edgar Wright. And Edgar Wright liked the audition, so he was like, all right, this American guy is in. Little did he know.
How many of these actors are Canadian, I wonder?
Michael Cera's Canadian. Quite a few of these people are Canadian.
There you go. It's authentic.
I think almost all the band members are Canadian. And then Mary Elizabeth Winstead is American, but she plays an American. You know, Brie Larson is of French-Canadian descent, but she's American. Yeah, I looked up everyone's full genealogy and nationality for this.
Listen, our research goes deep here at the Over Under podcast. We're pulling 23andMe results every single pod. Full cast list.
So the second Evil X is Chris Evans playing Lucas Lee. Chris Evans, probably most famous for playing Captain America in the MCU.
Yeah, this is like early Chris Evans, where he's like he's usually playing like fuckboy jocks in his roles, and he's great. The man, his eyebrows are working overtime in this movie. He's scowling so much. He looks like he's having a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think they all had a lot of fun because they're all coming back for the animated show.
Yeah. I we haven't talked about that, but that's kind of the reason we're doing this episode is that it's a Netflix series that's coming out, right? An animated one.
Yep, and it's all in the character designs of the graphic novel style, so it's I'm looking forward to it a lot. Next up on the Evil X's is Brandon Routh as Todd Ingram. He is the bassist for Envy Adams' band, and they are currently dating by the time Scott meets Todd. Then we have Mae Whitman as Roxy Richter. She is Ramona's only female Evil X during a phase in Ramona's college years.
As another Arrested Development actor.
That's right. So it was sort of a reunion between Mae Whitman and Michael Cera, who their characters dated in Arrested Development. So very fun. Very cool to see them together again. That is followed by Shota Saito and Kaita Saito as Kyle Katayanagi and Ken Katayanagi. These are two Japanese actors who didn't speak English.
They have no speaking lines in the movie.
So they have no dialogue in the film. Their battle with Scott is sort of a musical battle where these two are DJing and Scott and his band are playing, and they're going, I think it's called Amp versus Amp in the film, and they're just fighting with the power of music.
I guess, did Ramona date those guys at the same time? Is that what it is?
She dated them at the same time without either of them knowing, so they hate her for it. I'd be mad too. And then finally we have Jason Schwartzman as Gideon Graves. And Jason Schwartzman is more famous, I think, for his indie work. Does a lot of work with like Wes Anderson. He was just in Asteroid City this year. He's great. He's great in this film. And he's playing sort of the big bad of the movie, the evilest of the Evil X's.
Yeah, and this movie, it kind of writes itself a little bit because you just go from scene to scene to scene where he's fighting one X, and then the next scene kind of tails into fighting the next X, and then the next one, and the next one. The movie's, like an hour and 50 minutes long, so it's not a super long movie. It doesn't actually feel like it breezes by, but it's clearly paced well. Mm-hmm. And I think it kind of lends itself to getting like these big name actors because like Chris Evans is basically in one scene of the movie. Brie Larson's in basically 1.5 scenes of the movie. So you can get those actors in for, I don't know, maybe a few days or like a week or something like that. And it allows you to like pull in bigger names for those roles. I'm curious. So did this movie do well at the box office or no?
No, not at all. It did not make its budget back.
Wow.
They can't even blame it on a pandemic either. It just
it's tough.
Didn't do well.
It was 10 years before the pandemic.
So the budget was between 60 and 85 million. There were a couple of reshoots, and we might talk about that. The box office was 49.3 million. Wow. So it flopped pretty hard.
Yeah, that's crazy with this cast. I mean, again, a lot of these actors, this is like before their big blow-ups for something like this is pre-Captain America, Chris Evans. This is Brie Larson before like Room and Captain Marvel and like all the stuff she's known for now. Is this like pre-Parks and Rec Aubrey Plaza?
Right. So
this is pre-Pitch Perfect Anna Kendrick.
So people had already seen Aubrey Plaza on Parks and Rec. That show started in 2009. But she got the part for this before she started working on Parks and Rec. So they were casting, and then they were shooting like a year or two later. Anna Kendrick auditioned for the role before she got her sort of big break in Twilight. Michael Cera might have been the biggest name on the cast at the time because he had done Superbad.
Yeah, Superbad and Arrested Development. And was Juno before this?
I think Juno was before this, yeah. Cera was Edgar Wright's like first and only pick, basically. Interestingly, Universal wanted Seth Rogen to play the role of Scott Pilgrim, which would have been insane.
This would have been a completely different movie with Seth Rogen as the lead.
I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I know what they were thinking. He was a bankable comedy star, and they wanted this to be...
Edgar Wright watched Superbad, and he's like, listen, I just need one of the people from this movie. I don't care who it is.
No, Edgar Wright shot down the idea of Seth Rogen playing this part.
Seth Rogen dating a 17-year-old makes this a way darker movie.
That would have been nuts.
At least like Michael Cera looks like a child, kind of.
Well, Michael Cera was 20 when this movie came out.
Yeah, that tracks. He looks like he's like 13.
Yeah,
he looks like a little kid. He looks like a little kid that's like 5'10".
He looks very young. The actress who plays Knives was 25, so she was actually older than Michael Cera in real life.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah, so Cera was the first person cast, and then followed by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. So basically, they needed their Scott and their Ramona before they could fill out the rest of the cast.
Do you think Mary Elizabeth Winstead's good in this movie?
Yeah, I think she's good.
Do you think that like this is a role that like other actresses could have played? I feel like she's not given much to do. Again, it goes to the idea that like she almost feels more like an object than a character, where she's the girl. That's her role in the story, is that she's the woman that is being fought over. But we kind of learn a little bit about her like backstory as the film goes on, but like the movie's not about her, even though it is about her. The whole fucking film's like, you know, the whole story's set up based around her.
Yeah, I think the direction she was given was to sort of be cold and aloof and vulnerable only at certain times. And I think that's a difficult part to play, and she does it very well. So I'm not saying that another actress couldn't do it. Like Brie Larson could probably do this part. I think they're very similar actresses, actually. They could have swapped roles and it would have still been a great movie. But I think Ramona Flowers and her take on the character, for better or worse, are fairly iconic in the film nerd world at this point.
It does make the movie a little interesting because it feels like she doesn't give a shit the entire movie. She just seems like she's kind of there. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that's like the direction that she was given, is like act like you don't give a shit. But it's a weird juxtaposition when you see like this woman that he's fighting over the entire movie, and she seems like she couldn't be bothered. Mm-hmm. She's very guarded.
Yeah.
How old is she supposed to be?
I don't think that... I'm not sure if they say in the movie, but I would guess around Scott's age, maybe a little bit older.
Because she has 7 exes, so she's dated 7 people by the time she's like, what, 22?
Yeah, but they kind of say that like the first one was in 7th grade and they just wanted to fight jocks together. I think a number of them were just through middle school and high school, and they weren't like real adult relationships.
But apparently the relationships were... They were big enough of a deal that like those exes held on to that all those years later.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of supposed to be kind of funny that your 7th grade ex would show up to fight someone when they're
just fights to the death.
Yeah,
no questions asked.
I think that sort of juxtaposition is supposed to be a joke. So we spent a long time talking about this cast. It is super stacked with people who have done huge things afterwards, including a lot of other comic book movies. Dylan, who do you think has had the biggest career out of the Scott Pilgrim cast?
That's an interesting question because Michael Cera, I feel like, hasn't done a ton since then. I mean, obviously, Michael Cera, especially people our age, know who Michael Cera is. But again, he's like kind of one of those actors. He's sort of stuck playing himself in a lot of movies. Mm-hmm. Mary Elizabeth Winstead hasn't been in like tons of big stuff. I feel like it depends on what criteria you're using. I feel like Chris Evans is like the obvious pick here. Mm-hmm. Chris Evans was Captain America. He's kind of like he's turning into like a big star now that he's trying to get like past his Captain America stuff. Mm-hmm. He's been working for a long time, but he's very like a lot of range with Chris Evans. I think he's not just a guy that can play like that straight edge superhero. Obviously, he can play like the jock asshole guy. I've not seen. He's in the first Knives Out, right? I've not seen Knives Out. I'm sorry for anybody
Knives Out
listening.
is so good.
I know he's in Knives Out, and he plays like a cocky asshole in that too, right?
Yes.
So he's just great. He's really charismatic. He's likable even when he's like a bad guy in movies. He doesn't have a lot of like critical success, I guess. The only person in this movie that has an Oscar for acting, I believe, is Brie Larson.
That's right, for Room.
She won Best Actress for Room.
And we'll check that. And we'll throw a graphic up to
leave a comment down below if I was wrong in that statement.
We rattle off a lot of facts in this podcast. We're wrong about some of them.
Listen, we're working on hiring some new fact checkers. Okay, we're gonna see if we have it in our budget. But like I don't know, who would you say?
There's a couple of dark horses here. I would say that Anna Kendrick might be on the same level as Chris Evans in a lot of ways. I mean, they both have a film trilogy, right? So one's Captain America and one is in Pitch Perfect.
I wonder which of those trilogies grossed more at the box office. I know the Pitch Perfect films were really successful.
I'm pretty sure Captain America grossed more at the box office, but she's also in the Twilight movies, right?
Yeah.
So
and Twilight,
huge
success.
That box office up. That might be more than, I don't know. Box office wise, I would say it's a toss up between Anna Kendrick and Chris Evans. For like critical success, being like a critical darling, then it's between like Brie Larson and Jason Schwartzman. And then the real dark horse here is one who I just didn't tell you was in this movie, but Bill Hader is like the voice and narrator. He's the one who like announces fights and stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw that in the credits last night. He's like the last one in the credits.
Yeah, so he's having a moment right now. He's been having a moment quietly for like the last 15 years, I would say. He has a very, very big career. He's in Star Wars as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen Barry. I heard Barry's good.
Barry's pretty great.
I just don't have time to watch like a lot of TV shows right now.
He's the main character in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, so huge career.
Another Superbad actor.
Yes, also in Superbad.
Edgar Wright really likes Superbad.
He must have loved that movie. If our criteria is box office and being liked by critics, then Brie Larson might be the most successful because she's in that Marvel universe with her own franchise and she has an Oscar.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these actors went in like a lot of different directions. Like after this movie, I mean, some of them are more like TV people than movie people. But yeah, I mean, Marvel's Marvel.
Yeah,
and I don't know, like Captain America is in this movie, so it's a pretty obvious choice.
So Dylan, let me ask you another question. What weapon would your evil exes use if you were dating someone new and they suddenly started getting assaulted by your exes? Run it down. What weapons would show up as these exes appear?
Well, I have I would have 4 exes mainly. 2 of them are from high school, so I have no idea. I tried to message a couple of them. They did not get back to me.
None of them responded? Oh no.
Tough look for your guy.
Wait, who did you date in high school? We'll cut this.
Yeah, we'll cut this out. Well, there's one girl that I dated in like early senior year. She was a year older than me in ROTC. Her name was yeah. And then I dated what was her name? She was 2 years younger than me. Another ROTC person.
Oh, okay. Was she sister?
Yeah.
Okay.
We dated briefly as well, and then I had my 2 girlfriends in college.
Gotcha. Cool. So you have to come up with the weapons off the dome then, because they didn't get back to you.
So yeah, they did not get back to me, unfortunately. Two of the girls I dated in high school were from ROTC, so I feel like it would be some sort of like military based weapon. Or yeah, like a drill rifle or something like that, or a pull-up bar. Shit, I don't know.
Pull-up bar. Yeah, I've been in that ROTC room. We went to high school together, so I know who these people are.
And then my other 2 girlfriends I dated in college were like also like nerdy women. So I right off the dome, I have no idea. Maybe like, well, the first girl I dated in college was like really short, so I feel like giving her like a comically large hammer or something like that.
Yeah, or like a
That'd be a good pick.
spear or something, or a scythe, just something tall would be really funny.
And then my other girlfriend was a big like Harry Potter fan, so I don't know, give her like a wand, like a magic wand to kill me.
Wow, that's corny. But
I don't know what do you got? I'm guessing you got this all teed up. Did your girlfriends get back to you?
listen, I only have 2 exes. Neither of them are evil. They're both very nice women.
Did they message you back at least?
They would not attack anyone I was dating. Yeah, so I texted one, and I mean, you already know that she got back to me.
I'm familiar with this person.
Yeah. So I didn't give her context for what this was, but I said, if you were evil and good at fighting, what weapon would you use? And she said, probably knives, then just changed it to more specifically throwing daggers. So you know who this is. Could you see her attacking someone with throwing daggers?
First of all, this is a missed opportunity because this woman that we're talking about has pet tortoises. The pet tortoises need to be involved in the weaponry somehow. Whether or not she turns them into tortoise nunchucks or throws them like green shells like Mario. You gotta get creative. Throwing daggers. I don't think that woman owns a knife, to my understanding. We may have roomed together during the pandemic.
No, I told her that you thought she should be throwing turtles, and she said, I saw this morning, I would not throw turtle shells, but I would have pet snapping turtles to maim my enemies. So I could see her showing up with the tortoises like on a leash while she has throwing daggers, and
or she has like a death pit of like alligator snapping turtles just like ready to like rip you apart. Have you seen videos like alligator snapping turtles like eating like ripping like hot dogs and shit like that? They're terrifying.
yeah,
Do not mess with snapping turtles. Do not try to pick them up.
right. So she would be a pretty cool like villain with a very specific spin and aesthetic, and it's all turtle based. So good for her. Um, we love that for her. My other ex, who I did not reach out to, I'm not super sure what weapon she would use. I think, did you see Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember when Ilsa Faust is in the desert and she's got like a sniper rifle and she's wearing an eye patch?
Yes.
And it's really like attractive?
Because it's Rebecca Ferguson, yes.
I think my ex would look really good. I mean, look really cool. I think she would look really cool if she had an eye patch and a sniper rifle. And what's our podcast about?
What were we talking about? Got really hot in here.
Yeah, anyway, that's how we would want our exes to kill us. If you're a bad bitch and you've got a weapon that you like to use, tell us about it in the comments.
If any of our exes are listening to this podcast, feel free to come murder us. We ain't doing anything.
Cool. So we've talked a lot about a lot of stuff. Got a little sidetracked there.
Do we want to talk about the gay jokes now?
Yeah, we got to talk about just that.
This movie doesn't age very well.
It doesn't age well. There's a lot of gay jokes. One character, Wallace Wells, played by Kieran Culkin, exists mostly to be Scott's sort of like conscience, voice of not reason, but morality. But he's also just a very like.
He has one character trait he's gay.
He's gay. He's promiscuous.
The movie lets you know he's gay every single second he's on screen.
At one point, Scott tells him, I need you out of the apartment. I don't want you gaying up the place. It's crazy. It's insane.
There is more than one scene where it's played for comedy that they're both sleeping in the same bed together, same mattress together.
Yeah.
There's one scene where there are 4 men on this mattress, and it's just played for comedy like, LOL, look at the gay.
Yeah. But, you know, back then, and because
2010 is a different time,
listen,
man.
I have to argue that this film is underrated, which I do generally believe, but I can't really defend the problematic content. But back then, you know, everyone was just struggling for representation in media. So you see a gay guy, you see 3, 4 gay guys in bed together. It's like, wow, this is progress. We made it.
This is a progressive film.
Knives Chow is the butt of a lot of Chinese jokes.
Yeah, this movie gets really racist against Chinese people late in the film.
But again,
I saw your face. You were like, I don't remember this.
we were struggling for representation at the time, and it was just nice to see a strong Asian woman in film.
The end of this movie reminded me a lot of the end of Everything Everywhere All at Once, where like it becomes very like chaotic, and it's like this like over the top fight scene where like people are just like showing up with like swords and sword fighting. It's very goofy because Knives just like shows up out of nowhere at the end of this movie, and then Gideon calls her Kung Pao Chicken, which, come on, bro, read the room.
Yeah, that was insane. And then what else? There's a lot of lesbian jokes. There's one lesbian character, and her whole character is to also make jokes about lesbians. So weird movie. They say the R slur right towards the top.
Yeah, just get that one out of the way. It's maybe bleep that out on the streaming.
Yeah.
And then obviously the biggest problematic aspect of this movie is that there's an adult dating a 17-year-old in this movie.
Yeah, and no one.
It's a
really
very
calls
important
him
plot
out.
point to the film, and it's only played as a joke. It's never played seriously. Like, hey, bro, maybe don't do that.
I think the idea
Where's
is
this
that
woman's parents?
you just see. So her dad is in the graphic novel. He has a very big part to play in the story, and by the end of it, Scott gains his respect, and they are okay with it.
Well, that's all I need to know.
Yeah, it makes sense in the graphic novel.
I'll take your word for it.
It doesn't. Cool. So we really dug deep and got into the cast, the problematic elements, the story. Let's talk about how we think this movie is rated in the public eye.
All right. We're still going with our 1 out of 10 rating scale. We'll say this again as we do every podcast.
Let's go 1 to 7.
If you have a better rating scale, let us know. 1 to 7 for the 7 evil X's.
Yeah.
I would say this movie, like what people think of it,
Generally.
I'll say like a 4.5 out of 7. I think on an out of 10 scale, I think it's like a 7 to 7.5. This movie's elevated a lot, at least in my opinion, by like the technical side of things. The editing's really good. The sound design's really good. It's really creative. All the sequences, like Edgar Wright's, like, I mean, he's just cooking with gas with like the way this movie's shot and edited. I think it elevates it like way more than the film is like at the surface level. If you just had like a regular old, everyman director just like shooting this thing flat, like the movie would not come off as entertaining. It would probably come off as boring.
Yeah, I mean, without that sort of well choreographed fighting and all the cool visual effects and the fun music, then you just don't have a movie. You get kind of a bad indie film about a guy fighting a girl's exes.
Bunch of guys.
I think I'm right there with you at 4.5. I think that this movie flopped on release, did not get a ton of like awards attention, but critics liked it a lot. And then it's had like a sort of renaissance pretty much as soon as it was released on DVD, Blu-ray, and maybe VHS. Probably not VHS, but as soon as it was released to home video, it did pretty well, and people started really liking this story. And it's definitely one that most film nerds like us have watched, especially in our age group too.
Yeah, I feel like we're giving this a rating based on like general audiences, but for people like in our demographic, like nerdy people, this movie is like a holy bible of sorts for like a certain type of nerd out there.
Yeah, like I have this as a 5-star on Letterboxd. Like I'm a pretty basic millennial male film nerd. I love Scott Pilgrim. So 4.5 though, because I think a lot of people still haven't seen this movie. Like it's very much for a certain age bracket, I feel like.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. I mean, you take anything out of this podcast, definitely go check it out. It's a good movie.
With that, 4.5 out of 7. A very good normal rating system. Dylan, would you say this movie is underrated or overrated?
I would say this movie is definitely overrated. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I feel like this is a movie that is completely elevated by the technical side of things. There's two things that elevate this movie. Number one is Edgar Wright and the sound design and the editing, and number two is the cast. It's an absolute like banger all-star cast, and those things combined like pull up a movie that like on its own is just not that interesting. Like we talked about before, the protagonist of this movie sucks.
Yeah.
I hated Scott the entire time watching this film. At the end of the movie, when he has to decide between dating Ramona or dating Knives, I wish that both of them told him to go fuck off. Because like spoilers for any like young early 20s nerdy guys, that's what will happen in real life to you.
Yeah.
The women will both just tell you to fuck off.
Yeah. You don't get to get your choice between the two of them.
And then the women will potentially start dating each other instead. Scott is super not likable in this movie. I don't care how like realistic that is to nerdy, like awkward, narcissistic dudes. When it comes to like a movie protagonist, I just don't think it works. This movie's also like a shitty musical. Would you say this movie's a musical?
I wouldn't go that far, or maybe to the extent that like School of Rock is a musical. The music is largely diegetic when they're doing musical numbers, and there aren't like too many of them.
Yeah, that's the thing is that like there are a lot of musical sequences in this movie, and it's all like it's just noise. It feels forgettable. Outside of the Brie Larson song, which I know you really love.
Yes,
and I know a lot of people really love.
It's gonna be in here in my underrated argument.
Like I don't know if you can name like another like track from this movie. It just sounds like bad Black Keys music the whole time. Like I don't know if these are like I'm very sorry if this is like actual artists that were used.
They were
to like make the music for this movie, but like I don't remember like any of the songs. They all just kind of like meld together.
Yeah, I mean I think that's partially just the style of the music is like garage band rock, so it's supposed to have that sort of grungy sound. Where I don't know if I saw this at a Philadelphia basement show, I probably would not remember the music that well either, outside of that NB Adams song.
And then like this is very much like a movie podcaster take here, but I really wish they would have just established some of the rules of the world earlier in the film, because like shit starts getting like wacky out of nowhere, and it becomes a little hard to like understand like what is actually happening versus what may be like figuratively happening. I know you said like canonically like yes, all these things are actually happening. There's nothing wrong with saying like this is a world of where people are really good at fighting and like people are really good at music or something like that. I mean, shit, I've suspended disbelief for like way more over the top universes than this. It's just that at the base level, it feels like it's grounded in the early stages of the film, and then it goes like way off the deep end, and it just feels strange. Also, this movie just does not feel like a live action film. It feels like an anime. And I'm like not a huge anime fan in general. I'm sorry for any nerds watching this podcast. I deeply, deeply apologize for saying I don't like anime.
Wow.
Don't look at all of the anime posters we have behind us in the studio here.
Yeah, those are all mine.
But like it feels like I'm sure the Netflix series is going to be great because this feels like a live action anime. It's over the top. It's edited with like visual like onomatopoeia on screen, like the pows and like the explosions and the coins and stuff like that. It's just it's a strange movie, and I'm speaking more from like the nerd's perspective, I guess, where like a lot of them, like you said, it's a 5-star film for you. I don't think this is a 5-star movie. I think it's a movie that's really, really, really well made, and that can sometimes elevate a story that on its surface level is just it's just not that interesting. On this rewatch, I was surprised at like how I was just kind of coasting through it. I was looking more at like, oh wow, that cut's really cool, or like these pan transitions, or like what he's doing with like the overlays and like the cross cuts and like the Dutch angle overlays like that. I was thinking more like the technical side of the film than like actually watching the story, because I thought the story was kind of boring. I don't like these characters at all.
Cool. I mean, yeah, that's a fair argument. Nothing that I wrote down for why this is underrated, which is what I'll be arguing, really counters that. If you don't like the characters, you don't like the characters. And it's a pretty fair take based on what we've said about how they behave. But to me, this movie is just like so unique in its presentation. It's fast-paced, action-packed. It's got like an incredible like joke density, like joke to minute ratio. It's basically a heightened cartoon world that uses video game violence to represent the struggles of a millennial relationship. That's crazy. There's nothing else like it.
There's nothing more realistic. There's no more realistic depiction of a millennial relationship where both of them suck deeply.
They both suck, and the man in the story kind of perceives every struggle in the relationship as an epic video game battle come to life, and that's how it shows up on the screen, and it's just a ton of fun to watch. It's so visually engaging. I do like the characters. I like that they're flawed. I don't like that Scott dated a 17-year-old. That part, pretty bad. But, him cheating on both of these women, that's not something I like about him as a person, but it makes him an interesting person to watch because he's going to get his comeuppance and you hope that he's going to get better and overcome it, which I would say he does throughout the movie. I would say that a lot of people still haven't seen this film who I think would like it. It's sort of earned a reputation at this point for being one of those types of films that toxic men really like and relate with.
Yeah, this is definitely
true.
Yeah, this is one of those manic pixie dream girl films where it's a nerdy guy that sees a girl that is way out of his league and he's like, wow, I really want to date her. I'm going to go date her. That's this movie. Mm-hmm. This is just a very, very creative take on that concept.
Yeah, but I would say that even though Ramona is sort of a flat character, and you said she's treated more as an object, I think that Mary Elizabeth Winstead brings her to life in a way where at least I felt sorry for her. I was interested in her past. I wanted her to get better throughout the film as well. So I was rooting for both of the two lead characters throughout the entire movie. For all its faults, the movie is just about a shitty dude who learns to become a little bit better. That's basically the main takeaway, is that you can be a bad person, but you can become a better person.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of feel like the end of this movie really hurts that idea of Ramona getting her agency back and Scott discovering himself and becoming self-aware and committing himself to being a better person. And the movie just ends with them together.
Yeah, just dating and going off together.
Yeah, and I feel like the movie would have been it feels like a better ending if they go their separate ways at the end of this.
Yeah, so the original ending for the graphic... So the movie and the graphic novel end the same way, with Scott and Ramona together. Brian Lee O'Malley's original ending, or at least something that he drafted, would have had Scott alone at the end. When the screenplay was written, it was completed before the graphic novel series was finished, and Edgar Wright's original ending had Scott end up with knives. So there are drafts of this story in various formats where Scott ends up alone, where Scott ends up with knives, and where Scott ends up with Ramona, which is the canon ending.
There are no endings where Ramona ends up with knives.
There's no endings where Ramona ends up with knives, but Knives and Kim Pine do make out at the beach house in the graphic novel series.
Which unfortunately is not in the movie.
Right, right. Why? Did you want to watch Kim Pine make out with that 17-year-old, Dylan?
Listen, we went over this. The actress is 25, all right?
Cut this.
It makes it okay.
We got to cut this.
What ending would you have preferred?
I think at this point in my life, I think I might agree with you that maybe him ending up alone but still friends with these women might have been a good ending. But I think for the graphic novel it really works because they go through so much more together, and Ramona is a much more fleshed out character in the graphic novel, so them ending up together feels earned from both points of view, whereas this movie had to speed run a lot of things, and maybe you don't feel like they both...
That's earned?
Yeah. So for the film, I think him ending up alone might have been okay, or maybe he makes out with his evil self.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That he befriends the nega Scott.
Yeah, but the ending, I don't think it's the perfect ending where just boy gets girl, but I still think it's a good ending. It doesn't ruin the movie for me.
Yeah, it almost feels like one of those alternate movie endings that we used to get on Blu-rays, where they shot two endings of the movie.
Oh, I'm sorry. They shot the ending where he ends up with knives, and that is on the DVD.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Huh. They shot that, and then the graphic novel ending came out, and they decided to reshoot it. It was also based on test audiences kind of not liking Scott ending up with knives, which makes sense because I think she's still 17.
Yeah, we don't want a pro PDF file movie. Would have done way worse at the box office. Who knows? Maybe it would have gotten like hate watches at the box office.
Why did Edgar Wright shoot that end? Why was that his original ending? All right, whatever.
Listen, if I could interject like one small note, like to improve the story, make her 1 year older. That's all you had to do, man.
No, I think Brian Lee O'Malley really wanted to drive in the point that Scott's a problematic guy.
Nah, it's a little sus. That whole plot point. We need to check this man's hard drives.
What else do I have here for why this is underrated? Black Sheep, the song played by Metric, and is performed by Envy Adams and Clash at Demon Head.
Oh, it's a Metric song? Yeah, I like Metric.
Yeah. That song fucking slaps.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I wish all the songs were like that. I feel like it would have like elevated the movie even more if like the rest of the songs didn't all kind of sound the same. Because that's like the one that like really stands out from the rest of them.
Well, I think they are the only band that's actually successful in the world
in this universe. Yeah,
the film. So it makes sense that they'd be a little bit better than the people who are just playing in their living room. Mm-hmm. And I would also just end my argument with that this is quite possibly the best comic book movie come to life. I think this feels like a comic book and a video game while you're watching it. It's a beautiful blend of different media, and like I said before, I haven't seen anything else like it since.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible that the animated series becomes more well-regarded than the live-action movie.
Maybe. Critically, this has an 80-something% on Rotten Tomatoes. Probably like a 3-point-something. I don't know. For some reason, I've got pages and notes here. None of it has the critical numbers, but it's like, yeah, an 80% type of...
I'm guessing this got no like awards buzz or anything like that.
I don't think so. I mean, certainly no Oscar noms. But yeah, based on our arguments, do you still feel like it's overrated?
This is a movie that if you had asked me like 5 to 10 years ago, I would have said this movie is super, super underrated. It's amazing. It's a perfect depiction of what the young adult nerdy male life is like. Now, like looking at this in like my early 30s, this movie's definitely overrated. Doesn't mean it's not a bad movie, but it's definitely overrated, especially if you're a nerdy guy. This movie gives young men unrealistic expectations on the weight class they can punch up to in the dating world. How did Michael Cera pull Brie Larson,
right,
and then Knives, who, yes, is 17, and then Ramona Flowers? It's unrealistic, man.
Yeah, when you were complaining
don't
about
give me hope.
The way that they didn't set up the world well enough, I was like, I mean, I don't care that it's a cartoon world and they just kind of hit you with that. I do agree with you that it is hard to suspend disbelief for Michael Cera.
How's Michael Cera pulling these women? What is going on?
Nah, good for him and good for them too. Not really. Bad for them. Scott's a bad person. But yeah, ultimately, I think it's about this bad man becoming a little less bad, and we get to see cool fights happen. And that makes it a really good movie in my eyes.
Yeah.
So I'm sticking with underrated. I think a lot of people of all ages and demographics could watch this movie and really enjoy it. If you want to like experience a version of Scott Pilgrim that's more in depth and like shows you more interpersonal conflicts and relationships and kind of has more to analyze than just read the graphic novel. It's a really engaging way to experience the story as well. Or watch the Netflix animated series, which we're releasing this right around the time that comes out.
Yeah, we'll be releasing this episode like the week that comes out, so definitely check that out.
Cool, Dylan. Anything else about Scott Pilgrim? Any final thoughts?
No, just don't date 17-year-olds when you're an adult. Words to live by.
That's okay. So the two takeaways are check out this movie and don't
date 17-year-olds.
Before we wrap up, we want to remind you that this podcast exists in both audio and video formats, so feel free to check out all our full episodes on our YouTube page, as well as TikTok, Instagram, or wherever else you may get your daily dose of dopamine. If you're interested in supporting the show, we have a Patreon page. That link, along with links to all our socials, including our Overrated Club Discord server, can be found in the description of this episode. That's it for this one. Let us know in the comments, did we get it right about Scott Pilgrim? What are some topics you'd like to see us discuss in the future? Make sure to leave a like on the episode and consider supporting the show by checking out that Patreon page I just talked about. For myself, Jason Gong, and for Dylan, we will catch you guys next week on the Over Under podcast. See you at the movies.
Don't date 17-year-olds.